Grief mode has officially launched in Black Ops 6 Zombies, and I have now played over 5 different matches of it, so I'm going to give my first impressions review of the mode here. We're going to go through the positives and the negatives and just talk about my overall thoughts on the experience. Starting off with the positives, I do think this is a lot of fun to play. It's really chaotic, it's really hectic, it definitely feels different than regular zombies because you don't have nearly as much room to train around and run around, so you are frequently getting caught in situations where it is pretty difficult to stay alive. Now, is it hard for the whole team to stay alive? Not necessarily, we'll talk about that a bit later, but when it comes to individual players, yes, there are many times where players will be going down, especially once you get past like round 20, 25, and 30, because the actual play space is quite small and tight. It of course depends on the arena. Some of the arenas are more open than others, but some of them, for example, the arena on Shattered Vale that is near the double tap location, that is such a small area, and it definitely gets quite hectic. One of my absolute favorite things about this mode so far is the fact that salvage is very scarce. It is difficult to actually get a lot of salvage because salvage works a bit differently in this mode, where if someone picks up salvage off the ground, it will disappear for every other player. Whereas in regular modes, that's not the case. If salvage drops on the ground, all players can pick it up for themselves and you can all get that salvage. But in this mode, it's very different. You actually have to like run and try to get the salvage before other players do. And there's many times where you're just not going to have a lot of salvage, which this is a good thing because it makes it so you really can't effectively keep your loadout gun the way you can in regular round-based zombies. So multiple times I will be hitting the mystery box trying to get higher rarity weapons because I cannot rely on trying to get salvage to make the rarity higher myself. And that's good because I like the mystery box. I like hitting it. It's fun to swap between different weapons. And there actually is one grief called the weapon carousel that actually makes you lose your gun. So even if you do upgrade your weapon to the highest rarity possible, if you get that grief on you at some point in the match, you will lose your gun and you have to go hit the mystery box anyways to try to get a different gun. So I think that aspect of this mode is pretty exciting. I like the fact that you actually have a lot of variety in what you're using. You are not sticking with your loadout gun and just staying with that. You have to actually rely on the mystery box, and I love that. Now, of course, if you are very efficient in this game and your team is very good, then you could definitely have a situation where you are able to keep your loadout gun and you are able to get it to the highest rarity possible, and you are able to never lose it because you just never lose any objective, so you don't get any of those griefs on your team. That can definitely happen, but more often than not, you're probably gonna be using the mystery box a lot more in this mode than you would in regular round-based zombies. I also love the fact that there's a lot of ways to grief other players. Obviously, you have the objectives that if you win them, it will give a grief debuff to the other team. And so just some examples, there's one that drains your ammo, which this one really sucks. It just takes away all your ammo basically, and you have to go either buy more ammo or you have to just buy a different weapon, whatever you want to do. There's the weapon carousel, which is probably the worst one because it swaps between different weapons, which at first is kind of fun. It's like, oh, you get to try out different weapons, but then it replaces the gun you originally had. It just gives you whatever the gun you end on is, which is kind of just an insane debuff. Like, it really hurts your team because now any gun that you had before is just gone and you have some random gun that might not be a gun you want. So that's a huge grief that definitely hurts to get. There's one that significantly slows down the players that lost, so it's like this whole freezing effect that goes on the player and just makes them go really, really slow, and in the later rounds, this is pretty much a death sentence. There's one that spawns in a bunch of special enemies towards the losing team, which this one can be kind of insane when it happens. And lastly, there's one that significantly nerfs the losing team's weapons, which obviously is also kind of a death sentence in the later rounds because you just can't kill the zombies effectively. But there's also other ways to grief the enemy players. You can shoot them to slow them down. You can melee them to also stun them, and they have this little like stun effect that actually really makes it hard to stay alive. If you're getting shot while there's zombies coming after you, it's really, really dangerous because you're literally just like going so much slower than you were before. It's really hard to focus on shooting the zombies. So just focusing your time on shooting other players is actually a really useful thing to do. And of course, you can also use equipment to stun them. You can use shock charges to stun them, plenty of other things that you can use to stun players. It's very interesting and definitely emphasizes the grief aspect of this mode. I also love the fact that there's so many grief arenas. I've only played 5 of them so far, so there's still quite a few ones that I haven't even gotten a chance to play yet. I believe there's 11 grief arenas in total, different sections of different maps. Now, I do have a negative in regards to the grief arenas that we'll talk about a bit later, but in general, I'm just so happy that there's so many different ways to play it instead of like just having one arena per map or something. I think this is definitely a lot better, and it just allows the mode to have a lot more replay value to it just because of the fact that there's so many different maps to play on. Do the maps feel significantly different from one another? Honestly, not in a major way just yet. I mean, like I said, I've only played 5 of them, but there are some differences obviously in the layouts. Like I said before, that Shattered Vale area of the mansion was very hectic and close quarters, but then when I played a map like Terminus in the Biolab or the Liberty Falls Church area, it was a lot easier because it's a lot more open, so it's definitely a game that's going to last a lot longer. The Citadel arena, which is only one arena on Citadel, is by far the easiest one I've played so far. We stayed alive for a long time because it's such a big area. Of course it's going to be hard to go down there. And lastly, for the positives, I'm very happy with how they handled the mutant ejections and the chopper gunner. I was very worried about score streaks in this mode. I really knew it was going to be a cheesy way to just constantly get kills in the score streaks, but thankfully you can actually shoot people out of their score streaks. So basically mutant ejections are useless in this mode. I called one in once and the enemy players immediately started shooting me and destroyed the mutant ejection suit within seconds. So I got to use it for maybe like 5 seconds and that's it. So yeah, definitely I love what they did with that. I'm very glad they didn't make it so you can just keep spamming mutant injections and just non-stop using them. And of course, like I said before, salvage is not very easy to come by in this mode, so you're not gonna be able to spam them anyways. That's definitely a good thing. Same with chopper gunners, you actually can shoot them down when an enemy is in them. So I love that aspect about the score streaks here. I don't feel like score streaks are ruining this mode whatsoever, which is definitely a good thing. But now let's get into the negatives, and unfortunately there are quite a lot of negatives, and the biggest negative by far is the fact that there are no private matches available for Grief mode. It is very possible they can add it into the future. Maybe we'll get an update where they'll give us the ability to play with our friends in a private match, but currently there is absolutely no way to do it. You can't even do like a 1v1 or 2v2. You literally can't do any of that. The only way to play Grief is to load in either with yourself or with a group up to 4 players into a public match, and then you will go play against 4 other random people online. There is no way to play against another group of 4 people separately, which is just absolutely ridiculous and it sucks so bad, because one of the best parts of Grief mode was that within friends element of it. It was taking a group of friends and saying, let's do a 2v2 or 3v3 or even sometimes 1v1. I used to 1v1 my friends back in the day on Grief mode. It was fun to do that. You can't even do that in this game, and it really is a shame because so many people were so excited to set up Grief tournaments or Grief leagues and having like whole teams and everything like that. Like there's so much you could have done with that, but not having private matches completely kills the ability to do that. I also kept talking about the fact that there's some things that are going to be a negative with this mode simply because of the fact that it's in public matches, like for example Gobblegums, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But Gobblegums are something that I thought was going to be a huge negative with this mode, but I kept saying at least in private matches it won't be an issue because you can agree with your friends to just not use Gobblegums, so you don't have to deal with that. But unfortunately there's no private matches, so you have to deal with stuff like Gobblegums because other players are likely going to use them. Players are not just going to refuse to use them even though you might not want to use them. I've really been trying to figure out why private matches aren't available. Is it a technical limitation? I really doubt it. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to do that. I'm assuming it might be a higher up decision by Activision where they want players to use more Gobblegums, and they know players are more likely to use Gobblegums when they're playing against other players who also use Gobblegums. So they don't want a situation where people are mostly playing in private matches and then they don't end up using their own Gobblegums because they might agree with their friends not to use Gobblegums. Or perhaps they want people online because they don't feel like there's going to be enough people joining public matches, so people aren't filling up the lobbies enough. But again, like none of that makes any sense to me. Certainly there's enough people playing Black Ops 6 Zombies that would make it so public matches could be widely playable even if private matches are available. And this isn't even just a Zombies exclusive thing, because honestly, private matches have kind of sucked for a while, even in multiplayer. I mean, looking at multiplayer, I made a video about this before, they have been massively dropping the ball when it comes to private match customization in multiplayer. I used to love doing like custom game modes in multiplayer in Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3, where I'd have a bunch of different game modes with friends. We would make ourselves. We would have these custom preset classes that you have to use, and all that stuff was just so much fun, but they just don't have those options available anymore. You really can't fully customize private matches in multiplayer anymore, and I think it's because they just don't want people playing private matches. They want people online as much as possible, and it's so frustrating. It really kills that within friends element of Call of Duty. It's such a big part of what made this franchise amazing to begin with. Let us play private matches, please. The next negative is obviously Gobblegums. Of course, they did restrict a couple of Gobblegums that they felt like would be a little bit too overpowered, but a lot of Gobblegums are still available. Like Perkaholic right off the bat puts you at a huge advantage. Something like Killjoy during an objective also will put you at a huge advantage. Hidden Power puts you at a huge advantage. There are so many Gobblegums that will really help your team, so much to the point where if you have a team that's using a bunch of Gobblegums versus a team that's not using a bunch of Gobblegums, 9 times out of 10, the team that is using the Gobblegums is going to win the game. It is very unlikely that they won't be winning the game because the game is so centered around the objectives. Doing the objectives is so important. It is so important to win those so you grief the other players, especially once they get that weapon carousel and they lose their gun. Like, it sets them back so much to the point where if you make sure you're winning all those objectives, you are going to win the game. And Gobblegums are going to give you a huge advantage there. So definitely this is just destroying the balance of the game and is kind of turning it into a pay-to-win type system. Of course, you can earn Gobblegums for free, I know, but still, it is very unbalanced, and I really think that sucks, especially as someone like myself who doesn't like using Gobblegums. I don't enjoy using them. I don't use them that often in this game, but the fact that I'm playing against people who are using Gobblegums, it does kind of suck. As for the objective challenges, there's not nearly enough of them. There are currently only 4 different objective challenges. One of them is to get melee kills, one of them is to get critical kills, one of them is to get equipment or support streak kills, and the last one is just getting regular kills, all within the hardpoint area itself. But we definitely need more challenges than that because I gotta tell you, it gets so repetitive so fast. After 5 games of playing it, I am sick of those challenges. They are just so repetitive because there's only 4 of them. That's not nearly enough. There should be so many more challenges. Just as a few examples off the top of my head, I think one cool challenge would be something that spawns in one singular HVT, like a really overpowered version of the Amalgam, for example, depending on the map, of course, and maybe make it so whatever team deals more damage towards that HVT wins that challenge. That would be pretty cool. I would like that. Make it have a lot of health. So, you know, obviously it's going to take a while for the full group to kill it, but whatever team does more damage in the end wins that challenge. That would be cool. Another idea could simply just be staying within the hardpoint area as long as possible, and the more players that are staying in that area keeps getting them points. So you don't have to necessarily get any kills. You just have to stay in that area as long as possible. They could also do one where the area itself is moving, like the hardpoint area, like one that moves it around the map and you have to get kills within it while it's moving. That could be really interesting. They can do like special round objectives where only one specific type of special enemy spawns in, maybe like a bunch of doppelgasts spawn in and it's just about killing as many doppelgasts as possible. Like, there's so many different ideas I can come up with just off the top of my head, so I definitely think Treyarch could probably come up with more ideas just to make it less repetitive. That was one of the main issues with objective-based zombies in the past. Stuff like Vanguard's first 2 maps, Outbreak, MWZ, the biggest issue was the fact that there's just not enough objectives, so it felt so repetitive. So when you have objectives in this grief mode, you definitely need more of them. I think they did a good job with SAM trials on the round-based maps themselves. There's actually a lot of different SAM trials challenges, so why not just add more here as well? Like, I definitely think there could be a lot more that would spice things up and make it more replayable. Now, this next negative is something that I feel like I might need to play a little bit more of to get a better idea of if this is actually the case or not, but I do really feel like it's very hard for a losing team to come back here. So obviously, the game is very centered around these objectives. Doing them are very important, like I said before, because losing them sets you back quite a bit, especially when you get that weapon carousel. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that you get set back pretty hard if you lose those objectives because it makes them very important to do. But I haven't had a single game yet where there wasn't one team that was dominating the objectives pretty much the whole game, whether it was my team or the other team. It's very rare that you'll have a situation where one team will win one challenge and then the other team will win the next challenge, and then it goes back and forth. That very rarely happens. It always feels like one team is so far ahead, because once you get those grief debuffs, it's very hard to come back from some of them. Especially if you die due to the grief debuff and you lose all your perks, or let's say you lose a weapon because of the weapon carousel thing, like, you definitely get set back quite a bit. And because of stuff like the new point system, it's pretty hard to come back from that. This is definitely an issue I have with regular zombies as well, not just grief mode, but it feels really bad here where you don't have a lot of points at a later round and you just can't kill zombies because your weapon is not high enough rarity yet. It's not, you know, highly pack-a-punched yet, and you don't have enough points for ammo, and you're losing ammo constantly because you're getting all these debuffs. And look, I get it. Obviously, the griefs should be pretty major against the players who are losing, but they should have ways of you trying to earn yourself back effectively, and I feel like there's just not enough in this mode. It feels like when a team is losing, they are just getting kicked while they're down, and there's not much they can do about it. This only really applies to the later rounds. When you're in the earlier rounds, you definitely could still come back, but when you're like past round 30, it's kind of rough for the losing team at that point, and I definitely think they could make some changes to make it a bit better. I don't think they're going to change the point system, so I don't think that's just suddenly going to be different where now you can, get points a lot easier, but, there's definitely something that could change. Another core mechanic that I do think is negatively impacting this mode is the field upgrades. Field upgrades are way too much of a crutch here. You kind of rely on them so heavily. Stuff like Ether Shroud and Healing Aura, you're basically spamming it so often in this game, and I do think it is part of the reason why the matches go on so long. Like, even if a team is doing really poorly and they just keep going down, it's very hard for that team to just fully die out because, of course, people are just popping their Ether Shrouds, they're popping their Healing Auras. You're able to keep staying up because of those things. So I definitely think they should probably nerf field upgrades a little bit in this mode specifically. Maybe just make it so it takes longer to earn the field upgrades. I would be okay with that, but I definitely don't think it should stay the way it currently is. And I do think the game's lasting too long is a bit of an issue because a lot of people are leaving lobbies. I've been seeing a lot of people talking about it online on Twitter. They seem to be complaining that people just keep leaving lobbies in grief mode. And yeah, maybe they could do some sort of penalty where if you leave too often, you get penalized. Sure, but they could also just make the mode designed in a way to where it's very difficult for it to last that long. If it's very hard by default, if a lot of people are going to go down. And I think nerfing stuff like field upgrades could be a way to do that. It could definitely help make the mode hard enough to the point where it's not going to last forever. Another thing is that I do wish they implemented wonder weapons in some way, shape, or form. I've mentioned this before, but I do think they should bring in wonder weapons in the form of power-ups. Make it so each map's wonder weapon appears as a power-up that you pick up and you get it for 30 to 60 seconds, and that's it. It goes away after that. Don't put them in the mystery box. Obviously, I don't want people to have a bunch of wonder weapons in this mode. I think that would definitely ruin the balance of the mode for sure. But if they were power-ups, that would be pretty cool. It'd be like an extra fun thing to go for. Like, imagine seeing a wonder weapon power-up across the arena and the whole team just goes running for it because everybody wants it for themselves. I think that would be so much fun, and especially on a map like Citadel, having all 4 different swords as different power-ups would be really, really cool. Getting to use one of the swords for like a minute straight, that would be awesome, and there could be a lot of moments where it really helps out your team effectively if you get the power-up in the right moment. Now, I know I talked about loving the different grief arenas before. I really enjoy the fact that there's so many of them, but I do think they could be a little bit bigger. They are very small as is, like very, very small. And I don't just mean in terms of like close quarters. I mean in terms of like surface area. There's just not much area to the map whatsoever. And I think it would be a little bit more interesting if they were a little bit bigger. I mean, even going back to Grief in Black Ops 2, you have Mob of the Dead's version of Grief and Barry's version of Grief. Both of those Grief arenas are actually pretty big, but in this, you really just don't have much room whatsoever. There's really not much to it. So I definitely think like 1 or 2 extra rooms per arena could have been more interesting, and I definitely think it would have made the maps a little bit more fun. Now, this is something that I think is also an issue with the regular versions of these maps, but I think there just isn't enough like interactive features. I think there definitely needs to be more to it. For example, Cell Block, the Grief version of Mob of the Dead in Black Ops 2, had one of those Hellhound heads that would eat the zombie souls after you kill them. I guess it would eat the full zombie body, and it would actually give you power-ups for doing that. That was a really cool like interactive feature you just have on the map there, taking elements from the original version of that map. And like I said, this is an issue I have with Black Ops 6 Zombies maps in general. There's just not enough of that. But I definitely think these maps should have more stuff like that, just because it gives you more things to do. When you're just sitting there killing zombies, like having more things to do is always going to be fun. And I definitely think they could have implemented something here or there. I don't really know what. I don't really have many ideas right off the top of my head, but I think that's just a core problem with this game in general. It's not just with the Grief mode. And my last negative is a massive nitpick. I'm talking the biggest nitpick of all time, but I do kind of wish they used different music for the mode. I believe most of the music they used for this mode during the different objectives is straight from Modern Warfare Zombies, which I'm not really against them reusing music for a mode like this. That's not the problem. Obviously, I don't expect them to make original music for this mode, but there's definitely other music throughout Black Ops 6 or throughout Zombies in general that I think would have been a lot more fun to have. I don't think Modern Warfare Zombies music is that fun or exciting, but there are so many really cool pieces of music. For example, the Mr. Peaks mixes of the different songs. I don't know if you guys have heard them. I'll play them in the background right now, but I think it'd be more fun and exciting to kill zombies to songs like that rather than just hearing the same Modern Warfare Zombies music I've heard for an entire year, and I'm kind of sick of at this point because I played that game a decent amount back when it was out. So I definitely think they could have had better music, but in general, that's definitely a nitpick. It's not really a make or break thing for this mode. Overall, I'm definitely glad that grief mode exists. I definitely think it's much better to have it than not have it at all, even if there are some significant problems with it. The biggest one being private matches not existing and gobblegums existing in the mode at all. Hopefully they make improvements to it over time, and hopefully by the time Black Ops 7 comes out and we hopefully get grief mode at launch in that game, and it's a much better mode at that point. I'm definitely excited for the future of what this mode can be. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.